Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Shawn, and this is our top 100 favorite board games of all time. And today we are counting down the 50s.
And we have broken through to the top half. So let's get right to it with your number 50.
My number 50 is Isle of Cats. And Isle of Cats is a game that I kind of forgot about for a while. I feel like we hadn't played it, and we moved over to playing Isle of Cats Explore and Draw a lot. And then we went back and played regular Isle of Cats. And I'd convinced myself I liked Explore and Draw better, but now that I played the regular one again and remembered, it is my favorite one still. Isle of Cats, it's just great. It's such an interesting mix of card drafting and tile placement. And I can't think of another game that does that, well, that does that at all, and certainly that does that as well. And it's got the cool scoring thing where you're scoring from the cards that you draft, and those become, for some reason, they're called lessons, and I don't understand that. But for some reason they're called lessons, but they're just kind of ongoing scoring, so you're drafting those instead of drafting baskets to put your cats in. There's a lot of quirky, fun bits to this. And the expansions that we got, the asymmetric boats, the monsters or beasts, make it interesting too.
And the kittens. The kittens are the best part of the expansion because I love getting that 1 or 2 tile little cats, and they look adorable as well. But you're right, the scoring condition is interesting because you still have to pay fish for those cards, so is it worth your while? But that is how you can get a lot of points.
I love board games where you still have to pay fish for those cards and you got to get your baskets to catch your cats. It's such an absurd world. And that is my number 50.
My number 50 is Tillatum, which came out last year, and it surprised me. It's by Board and Dice, and we generally like Board and Dice games, but it's the name of a European city, and I haven't been too blown away by other games that are just named after cities. And I think what makes this one stand out is how many combos you can pull off because of how interconnected everything is. Because it seems like you're doing quite separate actions of either moving around or building something or putting people into your homes. But then the bonuses that you can get for each of those actions often will tie into the other actions. So even though one turn might be just move a couple of places, you're then allowed to pick up a tile, and that tile gives you a new action, and you can kind of almost go combo to combo to combo.
Yeah, it's a really clever game. I was surprised too because it's aggressively beige, but then it's really fun, and it is that whole combo thing, and also just how you choose your actions as well. There's this wheel of numbers, 1 to 6 or whatever it is, and then you roll all the dice, and then the dice go out there. But the cool thing is, the dice is the number of resources that you get in the color of the dice, and the place is the number of actions you can take, and then it leads to all these other things that happen. It was super, super surprising. It blew me out of the water.
Yeah, and the colored dice matching the resources is a huge factor of, I actually don't want this resource, but I want this action, so what am I going to do? And that is my number 50.
My number 49 is Hegemony, and Hegemony is this quite heavy, quite asymmetrical socio-economic game where different players are all different classes within the economic system. So there's the working class, the middle class, the capitalists, and the state. But in this case, the state is altruistic and trying to help everybody out. It's like a reverse 1984 kind of state that actually wants the best for everybody. And it's just really interesting. And you can tell as well that there are actual economists that help to work on this game. So you can see all of those bits in there. And I feel like I'm learning about finance and economy and all of these things. And the asymmetry is fascinating.
The asymmetric factions are really interesting because you do very different things. So it is pretty important that everyone understands what their faction does and a little bit of what the other factions need to do as well. Because sometimes you're doing the best thing for you, and sometimes you're trying to kind of just do something that gets in the way of the other players as well.
Well, the interesting thing about it is you kind of have to help everybody out because it's such like a symbiotic system that if you're the working class, you have to work somewhere, and that's going to help the capitalists and the middle class. But if you don't do it, then you can't build your unions and have your strikes and everything else you want to do as the working class. So you have to help them out. And if you're the capitalists, you have to employ the working class and you have to pay them. And even though they hate to do it. And so it's really interesting that it's like, I need to give you enough, but I want to make sure I get a bit more out of it. And that's fascinating. It's tough, and you really got to think, you got to study before you show up for this game. But I think that it's worth it, and it is my 49.
My number 49 is Ganymede. And we were first attracted to playing Ganymede because you love the moons of Jupiter. Mm-hmm. So the title just already got us playing. But it seemed really simple when we were explained it, because all you have to do on your turn is take one of the cards and perform the action on that card. But there's still enough strategy, because if you can chain the cards together, then you can do the bonus actions for how many cards you have, and which type of cards you end up for the scoring conditions can really change what you're doing as well. So each turn goes so quickly, but it still is really satisfying, and I feel like still feels like there's enough strategy in it.
Yeah, it's cool because really you're putting dudes down on Earth, or you're moving them to Mars, you're moving them to Ganymede. And that's pretty much it. Like, that's pretty much all that the cards do. But it's so much more interesting than that, because you've got to kind of time it, because all of the cards have different colors of people. So you've got to make sure that there is like a red and a yellow on Mars, but then somehow that there's going to be a blue and a yellow, so that you can move those over to Ganymede, and there's little powers that let you switch colors, or let you add people, or let you do these different things. So you are thinking ahead, but it's like these bite-sized choices that are just really interesting and engaging, and we play this a lot.
Yeah, it's become, I think, our go-to game for when we're not too sure what to play. And that is my number 49.
My number 48 is Clank Acquisitions Incorporated. And this could pretty much be any of the Clank games. They are all fairly similar, but I like the campaign one the best. The Legacy game, it does Legacy so well. It's super, super quick with it. It's got little bits of text, but they're actually like legitimately funny and fun, and you build out the board in a pretty fulfilling way. And it's the only Legacy game I have ever played that we actually legitimately still play. We still use the boards, and I think it's probably the best Clank board that we have after we're done the game.
And what is nice is the cards translate to using other boards as well. Mm-hmm. So we just bought the Legacy version, but then we were able to buy just the map packs that have the different sided boards, which is nice because those add slightly different ways of playing Clank, and then we didn't need to buy the original to be able to play those.
Yeah, we could buy like 3 more boards for like $15 each. There's just a few little tiny tweaks you gotta make, and then you can do the Ape Temple one, and there's one with spiders, and there's like an underwater one, and they all do add some cool different stuff, some cool different meeples. And Clank's it's just a fun game you can teach to anyone. That's a fun push your luck thing. And that is my 48.
My number 48 is Imperial Settlers: Empires of the North. And this is a game that has grown on me the more and more we play it. You are asymmetric Viking factions, and you are building out your houses, and you're going on missions, but the asymmetry really stands out. And it seems so minor because so many of the cards look so similar on the surface. Like, you are collecting similar types of resources, and some of the actions seem so similar. But how you interplay all of the cards and the type of things you're doing is so different. And in the base game, there's a good chunk of factions included, and then all of the expansions, and we picked up a number of them as well. So it's been just a lot of fun to explore all of the different factions.
Yeah, this game, it is so interesting what they do with such a small system, because you're just playing out a tableau of cards, and then you're sailing ships to kind of get more cards. But some of them like bank their money and then they save up all this money, and some of them build like 1,000,000 cards, and some of them have all these like play once cards, and some of them are mean and they trade things, but not in a way that you would like things to be traded. It's like a forced trade. And it is super interesting how each one of them plays and how they play against each other.
And the art is deceptively simple for the depth of the game because it's quite cartoony, which I appreciate. And that is my number 48.
My number 47 is Euphoria. And I feel like Euphoria is kind of like the underdog of the Stonemaier catalog. It's such like a big publisher, and this is the one that kind of flies under the radar a little bit. But I think it is a lot better than it gets credit for, especially if you add the expansion, which makes it a lot more playable for 2 and for solo, and just a more interesting game, I think. But this is all about a dystopian society, and it's a dice game, and you're putting dice out and you're getting these different resources. And then you also have these 4 kind of warring civilizations within this society a little bit. This is all very abstracted. But it's super dystopian, and so the clever thing, and I feel like we always talk about this, but it's such a clever mechanic, is that every time you use a dice, it gets a little bit smarter and a little bit smarter until it just runs away because it realizes it lives in like Brave New World and it's tired of eating soma all the time. So it gets out of there. But the theme is what brings me in. But then the gameplay is really interesting, and it's cool how well it ties to that theme, which I think is always great when the two things knit together.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is you get a secondary faction that's hidden. And so you do have these 4 different factions that you're trying to push your main one along, but you might have one that somebody else is also pushing along. Mm-hmm. So it can be really nice when that person has been pushing that one along and you get to reveal it and get that extra like bonus, and you're like, yes, I was part of this faction too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't usually like hidden role, but it's like a positive hidden role kind of, where you're like secretly helping somebody instead of secretly a traitor, which is really interesting. But that is my 47.
My number 47 is Res Arcana. And what blows me away about Res Arcana is you start with a hand of 8 cards, and that is it. Those are the cards you have to work with. So you do get to see what all of your cards are, but then you shuffle them and you don't know what order they're going to come out, and you just have to try and make do with the combinations of those cards for which ones you're going to pay to play out and which ones you'll spend to be able to play other cards based on the different locations that you're going for or what you're gearing towards and what your like magician or your mage power is as well. So you're really trying to find the symmetry between all of these cards, and because every card is unique and does things in different ways, I've never had a game play remotely similarly, even though it's just using those 8 cards.
Yeah, this game it's so smart how those cards have been made that they can all kind of work together. That I've never played this game and thought, oh, well, I can't do anything. Like, I always see those 8 cards and think, oh, I think this is going to be great. Like, every time I look at that and think, oh, I killed it. I got such a good hand this time. And yeah, it's just a fascinating game that you can do that much with 8 cards.
And it still can change throughout the game as you get different locations that give you different bonuses as well. And that is my number 47.
My number 46 is Azul. And I'm not usually that into abstracts, but Azul just grabs me. It's such an interesting game. And I am going with the original. I think for a while I was really won over by Summer Pavilions, but I think I've gone back now to the original. I've been playing it a lot lately on BGA, and we've been playing it a little bit. This is one that I like fine playing online, but it's so satisfying to play in person. The clack of the things in the bag, and they feel so nice and smooth, and I love putting them out and just making the patterns.
Yeah, in person is definitely better. And one of the key things is the drafting of the tiles, because that is what you're doing. All of the tiles go on these little market circles, and then you have to take everything that is the same tile on one of those circles, leave the rest and move them into the center. What that means is you can really try and make your opponent fail by drafting things so that you know by the time it gets to their turn, they're going to be stuck with like 7 that they just can't use. And that will all go to just the negative points at the bottom.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Carcassonne, where it starts off as like this friendly, like your first few games, or you're just worried about your thing, and it's all friendly and nice. And then as soon as someone realizes, oh wait, I can really screw someone over, then it gets real mean. And Azul gets real mean with its drafting, and that is part of the fun of it. Though I think it's like a fun kind of mean where it's like a clever mean because you've thought it out like 3 turns ahead, and then you see your plan happen and the other person gets so sad, but in like the greatest way. And that is my 46.
My number 46 is Village. And I'm specifically going to talk about the big box because that's the one we own, and it includes all of the expansions and some new stuff for the big box. But Village is pretty genius in how you do your actions because your actions are dictated by wherever there is a cube, and at the beginning of each round all of the cubes get randomly distributed at the different locations. And so you're trying to decide what cube which represents a resource you want, but also what action you want to do and what action you'll want to race your opponent towards as well, because some of them don't have a lot of actions available. So you'll want to get in quite quickly. And then you're also, and I love the theme because this is the key part, you have to often spend time to do your actions. And when that passes the hourglass, it means somebody has died. And you're hoping they die doing something that gets them put into the chronicle. But managing where your people are and how fast time is going is such an integral part of the game.
Yeah, all of the parts are fascinating because like when you say some of them you don't have a lot of cubes, there's one, this market action only has 1 cube. So you really, like, it really matters when you go to that, but you need to have the stuff to sell at the market to go to that. So both people are kind of racing to get stuff and then also going there. Or maybe that's not your focus, and it's cool because you can have different focuses as well, where you want to travel a bit more, or you just want to focus on, like, killing off your people quick and getting them all put in the book and making sure my next person's a farmer who's going to die farming, because there's a space open for like a legendary farmer, but all of the shopkeepers are filled. So I don't want anyone to die over there now. And it really is interesting. And just seeing like the generations, it's not quite as thematic as I thought that would be, but mechanically it's genius.
It is. When we first started playing, we were really conscious of time and not wanting to kill people, and we since realized the value of killing them quickly.
We're murderers now. Yeah.
And getting them into the chronicle. And that is my number 46.
My number 45 is one we've already talked about, Tillatum, which was higher up on your list. And all the things that we said about Tillatum remain true 10 minutes later. But Tillatum it really is so smart how combo-y all of it is, and how it takes those, what looks like such a dry Euro game and a lot of very dry Euro mechanics. Like you're building cathedrals, you're just moving around town to town, putting out houses, and you're fulfilling contracts and all these Euro-y things, but they feel just like more kinetic because of how they combo and how they all work together.
And it really is just from having the actions that tie together, because it does seem so separate, but just being able to pick up a tile that lets you do something else, and all of a sudden those things become connected.
Yeah, just really so strong mechanically that everything else kind of falls away. And that is my 45.
My number 45 is Camel Up, which is a racing betting game involving camels. And you are moving these camels along and you're trying to place bets for who's going to end up first at the end of the round as well as at the end of the game. But because the camels stack, then that can really shift things around, because one camel can move a lot by just being on top of another camel. Or they might end up on the camels that bring them backwards. So I love that you will have, you never know what is going to happen. I don't think you can be good at Camel Up, because I don't think there's a winning strategy. You can use the information you have available, and you can try and be strategic and do the odds of who might win. But then all of that goes out the window if that winning camel starts going backwards.
Yeah, there are too many, like anything to do with camels. There are just too many factors involved. Any dramologist will tell you this. And it's so fun, and I think it's because of all of that chaos. And because you can bring in new players, and they got almost as good of a chance as anyone else. Because even if they make terrible choices, those terrible choices could end up being really smart choices if a backwards camel decides to pick a bunch of camels up and rush them back to the start. And the board in the second edition looks great.
Yeah, it does look really great. It's a wonderful gateway game, and I just love like the chunkiness of the camels that you're moving. And that is my number 45.
My number 44 is Flamme Rouge. And even though the team who made this made Heat, and I think Heat's terrific, Flamme Rouge is still my favorite racing game. I love how incredibly tight it is. Because Flamme Rouge is about bicycle racing, and you've got two racers. But in bicycle racing, unlike car racing, no one's zipping ahead. You've got to save your energy. So you've got to stay in this pack and be right behind and just come out at the right time. And the whole thing is just a game of inches. Because like the cards you have in your hand will just barely get you to the finish line if everything goes right. So you really have to think about how to get a little bit over the finish line. So you can only play all of those cards once. So you're already, at best, barely going to succeed. And so you got to make sure you really succeed by using your drafting the best or using your downhill well. So it's just a really smart game, but it's also super fast. So it's like, it's smart, but it doesn't take you a lot of time to think out the smart choices.
And I'm really interested in the Grand Tour expansion because that will let you play multiple races. And Heat already has that in the main box included as a campaign, and you add different cards between each of the races. And Flamme Rouge already has a version, but it's an app-based version, so it's just a little bit clunky. And I'm intrigued to see what this Grand Tour box is going to be for the campaign version.
And we do already use the app quite a bit to do those campaigns. And we'll just spend a whole night doing like 4 or 5 races of Flamme Rouge and having the whole World Cup. But it's going to be interesting to see when they have that like tightened up version in the box and just what do they steal from Heat. But already, that is my 44.
My number 44 is Azul, which was so almost a crossover.
Yeah, 2 away. That's 2 now that have been so close on this list. We're going to have a crossover sometime soon. They're getting closer and closer.
And just like you, I am going with the original version, but I do really like Summer Pavilion. It adds some complexity to the original one, so I like that we have both options, but because Azul is a game that we just tend to pull out maybe like as a warm-up game or at the kind of end of the night, I do appreciate the simplicity of the original one.
Yeah, both of them are really good though, and they are my 2 favorites of the 4. But the thing I like about Summer Pavilion, well, there's a few things. I like that it has the added complexity, but I also like, and this is not a gameplay thing, but that the shapes are more fun to make shapes with. So when it's not your turn, you just see everyone around the table like lining up the ones that they have to make little animal faces and stuff. And I just enjoy that part of it. It's like this weird thing that just seems to happen.
Yeah, the tiles in Summer Pavilion are great. And I really like when you just pour them in as well. They make such like a good clanky noise. And that is my number 44.
My number 43 is Hadrian's Wall. And Hadrian's Wall is this very heavy, thinky roll and write game. And it's interesting because it's like, it's a roll and write because it has to be, because it would just take up so much space to have all of the boards to do all of these things. Usually roll and writes or flip and writes because they want to give you that quick experience, that like you're camping and it's like a thing to do quick around the fire kind of game. This is not that. This is, you're taking an hour with your head down, really thinking out all of the parts of what you're doing. And, oh, if I cross off this box, is it going to lead to this box? And how am I going to use my resources? And then you've got people that are kind of resources. And they're really important, which ones you have and where you put them when. And there's so many interesting paths to victory. There are things I still have not really figured out, the gladiators. I still have not really figured out the temples. There's so many little avenues you can go down in this and like explore things for something that's just 2 sheets of paper. And it's so good solo too.
I think it does work really well at two as well. And I think one of the trickies if you play with lots of people is some people's turns might last a lot longer because they are really thinking about what to do and maybe manage to trade in a few more things and do a few more actions. Whereas at two, I do feel like we tend to have the same pace and still finish at the same time. And just doing that puzzle is so satisfying.
Yeah, and it is multiplayer solitaire. There is no doubt whatsoever. We don't have a problem with that. Like I like just sitting down and doing the things, and then we're basically just kind of pacing each other with like, can I beat your score? It's so inherently satisfying, and this is like the comboist of combo-y flippin' rights that is out there.
My number 43 is Carcassonne, and this is a classic. It has sold millions of copies, and rightly so. Even though it's a game that a lot of people play early when they get into the hobby, it's still like a top 50 game for me. I love that we're both building this village out together and the competition that goes along with it.
We're building it together, but very much not together.
Very much not together. But I feel like we're really well matched because you definitely try and take my castles as much as I try and take yours as well. And so it becomes this really fun challenge of, can I steal this castle away from you or this farmer in this field? And when you notice that there's been this person lying there that connects just right to get all of the points that belongs to the other player. You're like, no, I thought I had that field. And so still, after so many plays, Carcassonne is so satisfying. And we got the Mist over Carcassonne recently, and I really liked playing the cooperative version of it. And we introduced the way to play it with regular Carcassonne, which I enjoyed as well.
Yeah, I actually like it more as an expansion to regular Carcassonne, which I don't think a lot of people use it that way, but it works really well. And everything that you said, like, you usually don't like mean games, but in this game's so mean, but it's like joyfully mean. And this was one of the first games that brought me into the hobby. This might be the first real hobby game that I played. And I must have played it hundreds of times by now. And I still will play it. Like, we still play this game at least once a month. And I'm still interested in it every time. We switch in and out the different expansions. And it feels a little bit different depending on what's in there. Sometimes we'll just play the regular base game. But I just continue to enjoy this game. Its staying power for me is unmatched.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Mist did give it a boost for me because it has ghosts, and we love Halloween, and anything that has ghost or Halloween themed is wonderful. And that is my number 43.
My 42 is Ganymede. And Ganymede is like you were saying, it's just such a great like comfort game. It's really become one of our ultimate comfort games. It's like this, Between Two Castles, Gingerbread House. There's a few of them. But I think the really interesting thing about Ganymede is it kind of feels like a larger Euro game that's just been somehow like squashed down. Like it's been put into some sort of like mechanics compressor that have shrunk it so that you still feel like you're kind of getting that experience, but in like 30 minutes and with less rules. But you're still making interesting choices. You're chaining things together. You can make an engine. You can set up these really cool combos. And just like now, every time I play a white card, I'm going to do like 5 times of whatever this bonus is. And it's satisfying. And when it ends, you're like, oh, is that it? Maybe let's play another one. And I love that feeling.
Yeah, I think part of that, it's a bit of a race to who can get the most scoring cards, but having more of those won't necessarily win you the game either. So the end can come suddenly, and that is really nice. You're like, oh, I just wish I could pull off this one other turn.
Yeah, I almost always feel like if I had one more turn, I would have won that. I would have won that handily, but I feel like we both feel like that. If I had one more turn, it was going to be like another 10 points. And they've just timed it so that it ends right before that, and it just really leaves you wanting more.
My number 42 is Great Western Trail, and I'm going to pick the original with the expansion over Argentina, even though I still really like Argentina. And in both of them, I love that you're a cowboy and you're herding cows and collecting different types of cows. But one of the interesting things is you can really set the pace. Alexander Pfister has a few games like this where you have a range of movement you can go, and some of it is really dictated by what the other players are doing, because you can maybe stop at each building and do lots of actions, or jump ahead, only do a few, and then get to the end and sell your cows and start again. And if you are going quickly, I'm going to go quickly, or if I'm going quickly, which is more
Always,
often
you're
the
always
case,
going quickly.
then that does push you a little bit, because you do want to make as many trips to Kansas as possible. So I always do find that interesting of, do I really try and do as many things as I can, or hope that I have what I need at the end to be able to sell enough cows. So I think the theme really wins me over, which is why the New Zealand edition that is brand new, I think is going to be my favorite, because I like cows, but I really like sheep.
Yeah, the New Zealand one, I'm fascinated because we lived there for a little while. We loved it there, and it's got like an island board, and it looks like it's like it's got more differences maybe than Argentina did. And I really like Argentina too, and I'm not sure which one I like more, actually, the original or Argentina, or the original plus the expansion or Argentina. But yeah, New Zealand looks really cool, and it's cool that they're all. I don't know about New Zealand yet, but I assume that they're all like different experiences that use that same engine. Because certainly the first two, I feel like it's really worth owning both of them because they bring enough that is different, even though that engine is so similar and the movement's so similar. I think just because the base of the game is so strong. And it's interesting to see that kind of played with in new ways.
It is, but we're having a hard time justifying owning a third
I
version.
know, but sheep.
But sheep and New Zealand. So I bet soon
I'd
we're
be
gonna
surprised.
have the New Zealand version as well. And that is my number 42.
My number 41 is Dorf Romantic. And speaking of cozy games, they do not get cozier than this. This is a game where some people's criticism of Dorf Romantic is there's not really a like winner or loser. But it's lovely for that. Dorf Romantic is like the knitting of board games. You're just kind of doing a thing, and it's gentle and it's lovely, and you make something at the end, and you're just kind of casually working together as you put out like your pieces. There's not really a wrong way. There's a righter way to do it, but there's not really a wrong way to do it. And it's just really satisfying putting everything out, seeing it line up. You're finishing your goals, and you've always got 3 of those to go. And as you do the campaign, you're picking up these other things that make it more interesting, but they kind of drip in at exactly the right time. So it's interesting every time. And even the second time through the campaign, which we're almost finished now, it's still just as interesting having those just drip in different ways. And that's changed our strategy again. But yeah, you would play this every single night if I would agree to it.
I absolutely would play this every single night. And I think this is one a lot of people probably like solo. And I do think it works really well 2 players, because we play it like 1 player. We have a big discussion about where the tile should go.
2, in the words of the Spice Girls, 2 becomes 1.
Yes, exactly. So even if it's my turn and I'm holding the tile, we have a conversation about where it goes. It really doesn't matter whose turn it is. And I really like that collaboration and that discussion. And because you can't lose, there isn't a wrong way, but it can work out. You still feel really satisfied if you manage to like line up the tiles just right to do lots of tasks in a row. And there's still those sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, because if we finish all of our tasks, we're high-fiving like crazy. But this is really, again, I like this high five. We high five like gentle dogs. But this is really a game where there can't really even be I can't imagine there being an alpha gamer in this game, just because it is so gentle and just like naturally cooperative. that it just, you want to work together. And it's like a lovely way to spend a night, drinking some tea, playing some Dorf Romantic, and it is my 41.
My number 41 is Marvel Champions. And in Marvel Champions, you are cooperatively trying to take down Marvel bad guys. And I'm going to pick the X-Men version, and I think that's mainly because of your love of X-Men.
Oh yeah, there's no point even in having the older ones now. We only, since the first Mutant Genesis one came out, it is now X-Men Champions.
Yeah, and I do like playing with the X-Men, and it's a clever card playing game that you really do have to work together and maximize each other's strengths a lot, because often one character might be better at like thwarting and the other one fighting, or you're going to have to heal each other. So I do really feel like there's a lot you have to decide on your turn. And so you can't really be an alpha gamer, but you also have to consider the other person and make sure they're doing all right and you're supporting them. We just played this yesterday, and I was thinking I might have this too low. But when I made this list, we hadn't played for a while, and that's where it ended up when I made the list.
Yeah, we played it last night, and it's always so fun, but we're doing one of the X-Men campaigns right now, not surprisingly. And I really like the campaign boxes. There are certainly bits, and especially the X-Men Sabretooth is too hard for a starting one. And other ones, Ronan is too hard for anything. So there are bits that just feel like a tiny bit unbalanced, but for the most part, the campaigns are really interesting.
Yeah, I think when I made this list, we had just played so many of Sabretooth and lost and lost and lost, and then finally had a win that I needed a bit of a break. So I won't be surprised if this is higher again next year. And that is my number 41.
And that is it. That is the end of the first part of the second half of the 10-part series of our 100 favorite games.
Yes, it is. And we have not seen each other's lists, so the further down we're going, the more curious I am, because there's some games you haven't said yet that I don't know if they're going to be really high for you or just not make the list.
Yeah, I definitely have a few that I was like, oh, it's got to be in this section. And now I'm like, does she just not like it now? Or does she love it? Have I won her over? Yeah, I'm fascinated each time we do one of these.
But as usual, thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you've played the games, if you like the ones we talked about. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.